Hey everybody, this is me, the Undead Viking. I'm here to tell you a quick little RPG story, D&D Story Time as I call this. And as an added bonus, this is not only a D&D Story Time, but this is also going to be a very, very opinionated reason about, well, why skill systems in D&D, in my opinion, really, really suck. But we'll get to that in just a little bit. All right, so D&D Story Time. So technically, this isn't about Dungeons and Dragons, but this is about a game that basically was based on Dungeons and Dragons. It was a game that we created as a group. And to be completely honest, my buddy Jason and my buddy Craig both did the real heavy lifting in the game. The rest of us were play testers and offered up our ideas and insight and did whatever. But it was a game that was called Fantasy. Now I've talked a little bit about the old ED&D rules, which is what we play, which is a D&D version that we created ourselves. It's just been a homebrew version that it's gone through multiple revisions. But at one point, we took ED&D and we actually changed it into a game called Code U, which was this weird thing where it was ultimate gaming, which was dumb. I think I still have a copy of the Code U rules somewhere. I'm actually pretty proud that I managed to hold on to those. But the other big thing is that then at some point both Craig and Jason decided they were going to make a game called Fantasy. And as you can probably guess, it was just a fantasy role-playing game system. This was a system that had stats like you normally would have, strength, intelligence, wisdom, that sort of thing. But it also had a combination of rolling up your stats, but also a point by option. And then everything in the game was based upon skills, like a skill level. And then as you raised, as you got higher level, you got to spend skill points to increase your different skills that you had. And it wasn't I'm just proficient with swords. It was you took sword skill and you improved it. And the game was played in you rolled a D100 was the number you rolled, and you rolled a percentile to see if it was a bit of a clunky system, because it was one of those things where it was okay, so my axe skill is 65, and I'm attacking now, but my opponent, if they had certain things they had, if they had shields or other things like that, that would lower your chance to hit. And so there was just a lot of factoring went into figuring out whether or not something was a hit, whether or not something was a critical miss or a critical hit, and it was clunky, but it worked. And we ended up playing a really, really long campaign that I at some point I'll tell the entire story of the campaign, and I really want to do that. It would take a really, really long time. Jason created it. He created a campaign where each of us made a character. And I actually created a character in that campaign that was one of the most satisfying characters that I ever played. He was a big. He started off as he was a military sergeant in there was this big giant fortress city, and he was part of the military there. And he started off as a sergeant, and as the game progressed, he got more and more promotions until he ended up being a general. And his name was Artemis Dracone. And my whole idea behind this character was, I wanted him to be kind of a jerk, but not but really, really loyal and really, really fanatical to both his country and his compatriots. And and so each person, when they made their character in the campaign, they kind of went with an idea. I don't even know where my idea really came from. I just had this idea that he would use instead of having a sword or anything like that, he'd use a giant axe, this big giant razor sharp axe. I think I was reading a lot of the Myth Adventures of the time, and they actually reference a general in there that has this huge axe. And admittedly, the Myth Adventures by Robert Asprin are very like farcical and humorous, but I always just liked the idea of like this career military man, and instead of like your standard weapons, he had this giant two-handed axe, and so I went with that, and I had that as kind of like a not so much a homage but it was just kind of like the image of that. Was the inspiration behind the character. But regardless, my buddy Joel, he was in this stretch of time where he was reading a lot of Drizzt books, or Drizzt, or whatever you want to call it. So he had this, he wanted to make a character that, dual wielded swords. My buddy Craig wanted to make a religious scholar / magic user type, which was weird because the world started off having no magic, basically because the fantasy rules had no magic rules to them, and so like they were being written as the game was going, and so like magic was being kind of created as we went along, and magic was appearing in the world as we went along. There was like our thief assassin type. My buddy Phil played that. And I'm trying to remember, and then the purpose of the story is that my buddy Shad, who was rereading or reading all of the Dune books at the time, he had this image of he just wanted to have this really, really smart guy, a mentat, basically, from in the books, in the Dune books. So he had this image, like this guy who was going to be super smart, not really be very, very capable when it came to combat, but like he was going to know all these things, and he also was going to be like kind of the face of the group. He was going to be able to talk to people, he was going to be able to do negotiations, and he was going to be able to get us out of trouble that we got into without having us to worry about like having to get into a fight. So there was this moment in this campaign where we had to basically this big giant fortress, empire, city-state, whatever, was being invaded we knew they were being invaded by these barbarians to the north. My buddy Joel actually was playing a character that was from that world, which was kind of like an interesting little thing. For some reason, he had rebelled against it or something like that. I don't remember the exact reasons. So we were in a situation where we had to infiltrate a building or a house or something, and like we ran into the general, or like the leader, the king of that army to the north within that, and we ended up getting in a fight, and my character ended up killing that king. And it was one of those things where it's like, oh my gosh, this was either going to be really, really good because maybe the armies would disperse, or it was going to be really, really bad, and that meant the armies were going to attack and they were going to destroy us. But one of the things about this campaign and the rules was that armor was really, really powerful. It prevented damage. It wasn't armor class so much as it was it's like my armor protects me from a variable amount of damage that comes in. Once again, this system had a ton of dice rolling. Instead of just being a static amount, it was like, oh, you have chainmail armor on. Okay, well then that'll protect you from 3 to 8 points of damage. Go ahead and roll a d6 and add 2. It was just like lots of rolling and rolling. But it was tough. It was tough to find armor. Armor was expensive. But this king, he of course had this huge set of armor, and my character was huge, and I saw it, and I was like, I'm taking this armor. It was very ornate, and it was like enameled, and it had these all these little carvings on it, and all these things. But I took it because it was a superior piece of set of armor, and so I started. So my character started wearing this armor whenever we were going to get into a fight. So ultimately, what happened is that. Agents within, and I'm giving away some of the storyline, but this is like a long, long campaign. It took a couple of years. Agents from traders from the city-state, people that one of my commanding officers, one of my most hated NPCs of all time. Remember that from when I ever talk about this campaign. I actually just hated this NPC. And then that's the mark of a really, really good dungeon master, game master, referee, or whatever. That like if they can like get you to hate, like I want to kill this mythical, like not real person, so I can like kill them. And Jason's really good at creating those types of characters. And his name was Captain Armand, and he was like my commanding officer, and my artist hated him. But Armand actually became a traitor, and he left, and he was working with the barbarians to the north. And we went to the encampment, and of course, like hundreds, if not thousands of these soldiers. So there's no way we could run in there and do anything. But we had to think of a way to stop their invasion, and we were like trying to come up with these ways. And so we have been watching a lot of Excalibur lately and things like that. And so we came up with this idea, and I think I've been reading Hamlet or something. And we came up with this idea of like my character would wear the armor, and I put a shroud over my face. And of course, my character had a beard and whatever. And so I shaved my beard, and then I shaved my head, because the barbarians, they shave their head except for like a top knot. And like for whatever reason, the assassin character Phil, after we had killed the king, he took the top knot off of the king, like he wanted to have it as a trophy or whatever. So we took that and we gummed it onto my head or whatever, and I shaved, and like I wore a shroud so that my face would be hidden. And the whole plan is that I was in the middle of the night, I was going to like come out of the mists, if you will. And because I think we had just a little bit of magic at this time, one of the things we could do is we could cast like mists, and we could do minor illusions, things like that. And I was going to come out of the mists, and I wasn't going to talk because I couldn't speak the language of the barbarians north. But Shad's character, the Mentat, was going to come forward, and he was going to speak for me. And he was going to say that Captain Armand is a traitor to you. He's leading you to a trap. You need to leave him or whatever. And I, as your father, I've come back from the grave, and I'm going to tell you to do not attack this town or this fortress or whatever. So it was a very fun, very cool moment that we created, and this kind of goes into one of my big rules as a dungeon master. And one day I think another video I want to do is like the top 10 things you should never do as a dungeon master. And and lots of people have said this, but this is that would be my personal top 10. But right around in the top 3 would be never ask your players for a die roll when you aren't prepared for the result. And that's like, it's like I have this storyline, I know exactly what I want to happen. I want X, Y, and Z to happen because that'll push the story in this direction. And then somebody says, one of your players, and when you do DM, your players are going to come up with crazy, crazy, crazy ideas. They're going to just be like, I want to let's set fire to the Minotaur body and throw it down the stairs and see if we can scare them or something. You're like, okay, roll a die. Well, if they roll really successfully, all of a sudden that has to succeed, right? Because you're asking them to roll a die. And then if you ask them to roll a die and they roll really, really well, and then you don't let them succeed, your players are going to feel cheated. It's a very important rule. And my buddy Craig taught me that. Basically through his own foibles. But that's another story for another time. It's a great story. I'll come back to that some other time. Maybe I'll do that video later this week. Probably next week. So we were in a situation where we had this super intelligent, super charismatic character in my buddy Shad, who was going to try to negotiate and try to impress upon this entire army that they needed to give up on their campaign. It was a Herculean level of a task, but it was something that theoretically we should try to pull off. And so it was I don't remember exactly what happened, but I do remember there's two moments that I loved. One, when like they're like the son of the king that I murdered comes out, and he's surrounded by his bodyguard, and Captain Armand is there, this person that I hated, and Chad tells this story. It's like the ghost of King whatever his name was, Marduk, approaches and says like this, that, and the other thing. And he says, you must turn away. And like Captain Armand, like Jason said, he goes, right. It was just like the perfect, like kind of laughable moment where like you could see this guy saying, you're really believing this, that kind of thing. And then the other thing is that like at some point, like we had like the perfect words, and we had a die roll, and Shad got a perfect die roll for his skill. I don't know what he rolled, but it was like great, right? And so and I said, it's like you must first slay the traitor that stands next to you. And so the new king, the son, he drew his blade, and he was going to like attack the captain, but of course he drew his blade, and everybody draws their weapons, and and I thought there was going to be a fight. But it turned out that, like, instead of them actually killing him, they actually convinced, like, he allowed Captain Armand to, like, convince him that, no, this is a bunch of BS, your father did not come back from the dead, whatever. And I don't remember how we got away. It was one of those things where we kind of crept off, and we had to rethink and retool. Now, this isn't the most, like, exciting of story to tell, because I'm kind of telling this story to kind of get to my point about why skills in D&D suck, and I want to talk about that here. But ultimately, like, that was like a really, really great moment because of the fact that it was like something where the players came up with their own like idea. An idea that totally blindsided a game master, which is good. The players should do that. The game master took that idea and made a very cinematic, a very cool narrative moment, something that we still talk about to this day. But the unfortunate thing is that it's like the reasoning that we were given why it didn't work afterwards was because, like, Shad, when he was explaining what he was saying, and we don't say, I say this, we try to actually say, this is another rule, that would be in my top 10. It's like, don't let your players say, my guy will go and do this. You just don't say that. What you say is, I'm going to walk over, and then instead of saying, I say this, you just say it out loud, instead of saying, you don't, like, third person it, if you will. But Shad, in his explanation and like the discussion, the negotiation, he actually screwed up. Like he misremembered something, like, about the situation. He misremembered it personally, and then Jason said, "Well, it's because you said that." Then, they knew you weren't on the up and up. They knew you weren't like this traveler that was seeing the phantom that was the person's father and those sorts of things. And Shad, rightfully so, said, well, that's BS. It's like he said, I misspoke, but my character wouldn't misspeak. And he even drew an allegory where he was like, Lance can't go out in the street and start swinging a two-handed axe at people. He's not strong enough to pull an 80-pound axe and start swinging it like it's nothing. And start carving people up, and it's like, because that's not him, but he's got a really good axe skill on his character, and so when he rolls against that, he's like, you can't use my words as the representation of the skill, and we agreed completely, but ultimately this is one of those things where, and this is going to go back to my first thing, don't let them make a roll that you don't want them to make. Jason knew that it wasn't going to work. He had decided that, hey, because part of that storyline is that the invading army is supposed to destroy that city state. That was just part of his narrative. It was going to happen. He had planned it was going to happen when he first created the campaign, and it wasn't going to change. So it was an aside. It wasn't a worthless aside because, like I said, it was a very fun moment. It was a very interesting moment. It's a very narrative moment, and it's part of the giant story of the campaign that was fantastic. But it was like one of those things where some choices were made that could have been done better as far as the storytelling goes. But stepping back, it's like to the why skills suck is that it's certain skills have to exist. Like a thief's ability at finding traps. It's just iconic, right? Skills of where you have a distinct like goal in mind that needs to be represented by a chance to succeed or fail, such as like trying to climb a rope. Like I said, finding traps, things like that. Where things get murky is when you start like actually having the players, like anything that is not like a physical thing, you start to have the players like use those things to actually like decide whether or not they succeed or fail in certain situations, which but it's tied into the role-playing aspect of the game as well. So it's one of those things where it can help a little bit, like if you say, oh, I'm gonna try my intimidate skill, which would basically be a negotiate skill, where it's like I take out my sword and I put it on the person's chin, and I'll say, it's like you look pretty funny without a nose. You better tell me what I want to know. Now the player, the DM could say, oh, it's like actually add 2 to your roll or whatever, to see because that's a bonus because you're threatening the person or whatever. But the bigger problem is that it's like when you have like a negotiate like we had with Chad, is that you can't use the player's words against the player words against what the character is trying to do. The same thing goes with, in my opinion, like when it comes to like knowledge skills and things like that. And this is more of my beef than anything, is with knowledge skills. Oh my god, it just drives me crazy how knowledge skills are abused and it's like, and we still do it. I mean, like when I run my campaigns, I try to like just break people of knowledge skills. I think like certain knowledges are like okay for like certain things, like it's like I've never been in this town before. Can I use like my streetwise skill to like roll and like say, it's like where would I think I could find like where would I think like the armorers would be in this town because I've never been there before. And it's like, roll against your skill. It's like, armorers would need fresh water. They need you can look for smoke, things like that. Where it's like, but those things, and I'm even saying that right now, could easily just be done role playing wise as well. I mean, it would just be, or just ask the guard, hey, where do I find a smith? But there's lots of different situations where those things will come in handy. The problem with knowledge skills is they just get abused for like tons of things that the players should be willing to find out for themselves through the process of the game. If you want to know something about the wizard that lives up on the hill, you shouldn't be able to just say, I'm gonna like roll my knowledge arcana and see if I know any rumors about it. No, go into a bar. Talk to the bartender. Ask them about the crazy kook that lives on the top of the hill. Go and like see if you hear anything about them, like as far as like them being evil or bad or whatever. Just role play that out. I mean, it's just like you're taking, and it's like, and I know that role playing can sometimes take a long time, but like you can play out a conversation with random passerby or goofus behind the bar in like 5-10 minutes, and it enriches the game that you're in. And plus you have situations where then like you can even, that bartender becomes like an important character. Like, I'm gonna go talk to that guy I talked to. I never got your name. What was your name? My name is Jackson. Oh, okay. And then all of a sudden everybody's got their name written down there, and everybody knows that in that town of Hillberry there's that bartender, and his name is Jackson, and he was able to help you with that one thing before. Maybe we should go back there and see if he knows anything about this. And all of a sudden now you've created this world more. You've done some world building with the aid of the players because they were looking for some information about that guy who lived up on top of the hill. And now it's like 3 sessions later, you're still going back to Hillberry. And when you go back to Hillberry, you go to the Puking Boar Inn and you talk to Jackson, who now knows you and he considers you a friend. And he's like, hey, by the way, I've heard about some like wolf riders, some goblin wolf riders that have been terrorizing the town next to us. I hear there's a pretty big reward of that. And now all of a sudden, you have this world you've created if you allow people. But if way back in the time it was like, I'm gonna roll my my skill, my knowledge skill here. Oh, I got a 32. Oh yeah, the kook on the hill. He was a former wizard, but he left the military, and now he doesn't want to be bothered by anybody. Oh, okay, and it's like, oh well, that was great. Thanks for not making that into anything. Back in the day, like if you found a magic item or if you found something you didn't know about, like in AD&D, you had to go and track down a sage, and you had to go track down somebody that was smart and knowledgeable, and you paid them a bunch of money, and maybe they sent you on a quest before they'd even help you, and things like that, where you'd have to find it. In fact, the only like people that would know any of that stuff were like bards, because they had legend lore skill, where basically they had heard poems or stories or songs that had allegories to weird little like mishaps and spoke of heroes, and it was just kind of like, oh, I've kind of heard about this, a long time ago, like an ancient, king, killed himself when he realized that, like, his daughters had been turned into undead, about this, and that's why, these hills are haunted to this day. And it's just like, oh, okay, then that would make sense, because this bard had heard this song, many, many, many years ago, or something like that. But now it's like, oh, I have knowledge monsters, I have knowledge dungeons, I have knowledge elementals, I have knowledge arcana, and it's like, and who has all the knowledges? They have the mages. And why do they have the knowledges? Because they have high intelligence, and they get a ton of skill points, and they don't have anything to spend it on, because if you're relying on your mage to be like, like climbing hills and climbing trees and doing all these things, when they can cast levitate, who cares? And so now you just have like this thing where it's like, oh, it's just like, yeah, this is like, and I should say this, if you have a character in your party that has like, okay, he's my wizard, he's got a 20 intelligence, he's got all these knowledge skills, and they're all super, super high, and I'm rolling against these, and I'm getting a score of 34. What do I know? Now, if you're the DM and you don't want them to know anything about this, like, you can say, well, you just don't know. But they're going to be like, well, what do you mean I don't know? I'm super intelligent. I know all kinds of things. Look at all the points I put into this, and it becomes a point of friction between you and the other players. And and I realize that I might be alone on this one, but I think that skills in D&D games kind of end up, they take the players out of their characters, and they see their character as just a bunch of points on a page, and they're not trying to actually role play the game. They're trying to ROLL play the game, where it's like, okay, it's just like I'm playing a one-player game of a turn-by-turn strategy D&D game, where it's like, okay, I'm going to try to do this. I'm going to roll a d20. Okay, I got it. What's next? Okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to roll a d20. Okay, I got it. What's next? And they're not like actually like trying to live and breathe in the character that they've created. And I just, and yes, there are some skills that need to exist. Like I said, like if you need to figure out whether or not somebody can swim or drown, a skill check is perfectly reasonable in those situations. But you shouldn't just have all the secrets of your world be fathomable because somebody manages to roll really well on a knowledge skill. It just does. I don't like that. And the thing about the other stuff, the stuff like that bothers me, is that you have these people that gain levels and they start putting points into skills for skills that they never even used. It's like, oh, I'm going to improve my pickpocketing skill. It's like, when has your character been pickpocketing? When have you been like training pickpocketing skill or anything like that? It's just like, I try to make sure that my players have a good excuse as to why they are allowed to put points into that skill as they gain levels. And if I hold them to it. It's just like, if have some forethought into the situation. If you want to, work on your disguise skill, then you should be working on your disguise skill. If you want to learn more about the history of the land of Valencia, then you better be finding some books on the history of the land of Valencia. And every single given time, you should be like, yeah, I'm going to be, and it could even be a standing order type thing. You could just say, every time we bed down for the night and we camp, I'm going to take out that giant book and I'm going to read it, and I'm going to go through it, and I'm going to read about the land of Valencia and try to find out more about it. And I just think if you hold your players to that, then and have some meaning behind it, then I think that helps out a great deal. And then at least you can say, oh yeah, you had that book. You end up in the land of Valencia. You're like, what are these hills known for? These are known as the Goblin Hills, or they're known as the Minotaur Hills, or they could be some, these are the Blue Hills because they a long time ago there was a sapphire mine here, that the gnomes mined out, and you know that because you read that book and you went to the time of telling me that you're reading that book, and then you put some points into that skill, and I allowed you to make your roll, and you remembered reading that portion. And so long story even longer, if you're going to allow knowledge skills, which I'm a big fan of not allowing them, but if you're going to allow people to have knowledge skills, have them there's some rudimentary knowledge. Sure, your first level character, it's like, yeah, boom, I have a point in that. And because you know what, you spent your entire life up to this point before you finally decided, I'm going to go out into that cave out in the hill and hopefully come back out alive. So if I run into a gelatinous cube in there, maybe I read something in a book that tells me don't let it touch you because it'll paralyze you. Fine, you know that, right? Cool. Super. But going forward from there, if you want to increase that skill, and you want to learn more about dungeon creatures, then you know what, you better be finding some sort of notebook or book, or have somebody who's going to take some time to teach you those things, and so you can put another point in that. Otherwise, no way, Jose. You've got to have some sort of basis in why you get to increase your skills as far as that goes. But there you go. That was a little bit of a story, a little bit of things I think that every DM should do, and a lot of a rant against skill systems. And specifically skill systems in D&D where it relies on the player to supply part of the problem. It's like if your character has a good charisma and a good negotiate, then you shouldn't penalize them for the player's words. Just like you shouldn't, but also the character should have some sort of representation as to why they are knowledgeable when it comes to the thieves guilds in this town, or things like that, and if they're going to be rolling against their skills. And I firmly believe that something that just drives me crazy is when it's like, they start casting a spell, and they're like, knowledge arcana, what spell is cast? It's like, no, you don't get to just notice it. You don't get to know. You just, it's like, you can take a guess. But that's, I don't want to start ranting again. But hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you very much for watching. If you like videos like this, let me know. If you have a topic that you'd like me to give my thoughts on, by all means, post that. I'll be happy to do that. Somebody asked a question a while back, and I want to mention this. Somebody asked in OSR games, why did certain classes, did it cost more experience for them to raise levels? And it was just a game modification, right? It was one of those things where wizards took a lot of experience points to gain levels because of the fact that ultimately they became the most powerful character. There's a big difference to be able to sling giant balls of fire around a room as opposed to, your thief who, basically kind of skulked around in a battle and then was the person that you called upon to open up the chest after you killed off the ogres. And so also I think clerics gain levels pretty quickly as well, and thieves did too, for their ability to stay alive. And also clerics gaining levels meant more spells, and when they had more spells, they were able to heal the players more, and so inherently that was a great deal of help, and it prolonged the lives of the players in those groups. And like it was just, and also it kind of like made narrative sense. It's like a paladin, because of the fact that they have all these special skills and things like that, would cost more experience to gain a level than say a fighter, and same thing for rangers as opposed to a fighter. And so forth. Assassins gain levels slower than thieves because they have more specialized skills. Stuff like that. So I forget who asked me that question. I apologize, but that's the reason why there was like a different experience points gain for the different characters. But yeah, and if anybody has any questions like that, questions about D&D or like anything like that, by all means, like ask away, and I would love to like have like a weekly or bi-weekly thing of questions people have asked me, either about my campaigns or about D&D in general or role-playing games in general, and give my opinions about it. I'd love to do that if you have anything like that. And if you have questions like that, you can post those in comments, and I can address those at some point, or you can reach out to me like via the Twitter machine at Undead Viking, or you can reach out to me at undeadvikingvideos@gmail.com, and I can try to like collect all those and do those. But yeah, if there's any kind of a D&D type of topic or a D&D thing that you'd like me to review, then by all means post those, and I'll try to get to those as soon as I can. Thank you very much for watching these videos. I'm having a lot of fun making them. And yeah, until next time, you're an awesome human being. Continue being an awesome human being. I'm the Undead Viking, and I will talk to you again soon.